Heidi, welcome, and thanks for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. I'm a career CMO. I've been in marketing for my entire career, having started really on the advertising side, but mostly focused on fast-growing software businesses. So I have recently, in the last year, joined Workfront, and I am the CMO at Workfront.
Well, I'm excited to talk with you about our topic today, which is sales and marketing operating as one team. And so I just wanted to ask, how can that happen? How can sales and marketing operate as one team, even though both groups may report to different people?
Yeah, well, throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to work really well with some sales teams. And I've also learned my fair share at working with sales teams and marketing teams that don't align very well. And so all of those lessons learned include things like ensuring that goals are aligned and ensuring that the marketing team has the same goals as the sales team. And certainly the marketing team tends to have a broader view of the marketplace and a longer term view, but the immediate term goals have to be aligned. So being aligned on lead generation or demand goals with the sales teams is critical. And we talk about it inside Workfront as one view of the truth, because so many times we've all probably sat in meetings with sales and marketing executives, and you spend most of the meeting arguing about whether or not the number is right, instead of diagnosing what we need to work on in order to improve. And so ensuring that you're working on a common set of numbers is hard. It sounds really easy, but it's hard. And so that's one of the things that I think is a key to success, is ensuring that measurement and all of the programmatic as well as process-oriented partnership between sales and marketing is aligned, because it's one business process. The way that I think about it is marketing and sales historically have been thought of as two separate business processes, and where there's a critical handoff, and we talk about it as a critical handoff. But really the way that I think about it is it's one business process. And inside a company, it's really focused on the revenue of your business. And that starts from the time that a marketing team targets a specific customer or prospect, and they raise their hand and ask for more information or engage, all the way through to close business. And so it's one business process, not two separate business processes. And, oh, by the way, it's aligned to something way more important than a sales team or a marketing team. It's aligned to how a buyer buys your product. And we forget that sometimes. We're like, oh, well, the marketing process does this. I'm like, oh, no. We're just trying to facilitate a buying process. So when you flip that and you look at the focus on the customer, all of a sudden marketing and sales from an outreach, from an engagement perspective, becomes has one unified goal, which is to move a buyer through a buying process. When you have that change of mindset, that becomes really important versus, I've worked in businesses where we focus really cleanly on that critical handoff. And that handoff is the most important piece. And frankly, it's a critical piece, but it's not the most important piece.
To your point, I mean, marketing now is even going beyond handing off the lead. It's from front to all the way to how do we continue and retain our customers too.
Yeah. Oh, it should support, and we have the tools to support that entire life cycle. And when I first joined Workfront, one of the things that we did was, as soon as we handed off an opportunity to the sales team, it's like, we're out, we're done, check, we're finished. And frankly, there's so many tools in a marketing toolkit that we can align with a selling motion and be more successful in helping to nurture prospects through a buying process. And that is, to me, that has been an evolution that's been enabled by technology. And is one that is really critical in ensuring that sales and marketing is aligned.
Sounds easier said than done to get marketing and sales to agree on what common goals and measurements are. So what have you found has worked for you to get that? I don't know if I want to say alignment, but it really is where you're looking at the same numbers.
Yeah, so I think it has to start big picture and really understanding targets and targets by sales teams
Hmm.
and working backwards from there. Because if we understand that is our goal from a marketing perspective is certainly to raise awareness for the business and drive demand for the business. But our
Yes.
ultimate goal is to drive revenue for the business. And so we can all if we can all understand our revenue goals and then the steps that we all need to take in order to get there. So in order to meet our revenue goals, backing out of that, what
Yeah.
kind of demand generation volumes do we need to have in order to meet those revenue goals? And agreeing with the sales team, not only on what are we going to use as our qualification criteria, how are we going to evaluate whether or not a lead is truly a good lead or a bad lead, but also ensuring that from a volume perspective, the marketing team is lined up to support the revenue goals of the company. And so backing it out that way to me is really critical. And we've
Hmm.
all been in situations where, you go through, there's a pendulum swing that goes from the leads are terrible and we're getting way too many of them to the leads are high quality, but we're not getting enough of them. And that's a constant balancing act with engaging with the sales team. And there may be reasons to shift or change a qualification criteria based on maturity of a field sales organization or a time during the market, during market seasonality. There are lots of reasons to make those changes, and you can't do that in a vacuum.
So what have you found to break down the silos and start having conversations so it feels like we understand and we're working together?
To me, you have to go all the way back to the customer, and you have
Yeah.
to understand the buying process of a customer.
Mm.
And if you can look at the buying process of your customer and map that out to not only the activities and programs that you engage with in order to move that prospect or customer through a buying cycle, but understand how it maps to a sales process
Yes.
is really important. So if you can get to a place where you can map out the buying process from the time someone raises their hand or engages in some way, all the way through to closing business and revenue, and understand how the customer or the buyer operates during that and how that maps to our internal process, you can actually really demonstrate where marketing adds value and where
Mhm.
sales adds value and where both of us add value. And that's where you can look at language and metrics and ensure that at each stage you have the right metrics that you all agree on and the right language that you're using to describe. And so to me, you have to go all the way back to how does your customer buy your product? And if you don't know that process and you don't know how your marketing programs or your sales teams operate aligned to that, then you're missing a big piece.
For a listener out there says, that sounds great. How might I go about doing it? What have you found works, or what advice might you have for someone who would like to actually go back to that beginning? Is it journey mapping? Is it interviewing customers? I mean, what are the steps you would recommend?
I think it's a combination. I think that there is nothing that is more valuable than interviewing customers that have just been through that process. And as marketers, we don't always have as much engagement directly with customers as I think we should.
Mm-hmm.
So sitting down with customers that have just gone through a sales cycle, understanding the process that they went through, really listening to what their needs are, and starting to look at how that, because you see commonalities for how customers buy whatever product it is,
Right.
and then taking that, making some assumptions, standardizing it, and then mapping it to internal processes. I know, we just did this recently at Workfront, and we learned a lot. One of the most valuable things that we learned is there were stages that we weren't touching.
Mm.
We weren't touching the buyer in the buying cycle, and we were getting them to engage, but then we weren't continuing that conversation in a way that helped to move them forward. Or we weren't providing the kind of nurture programs that we
Mhm.
could in the early stages of the sales cycle. And to me, just taking the time to step back and to really spend time with customers, listen to how they buy software is absolutely the place to start. And it's great. It's great practice for marketing teams to do that work, and creates a lot of synergy with the sales team.
Mhm.
Because many times the criticism a sales team has is they're on the front lines. They're the ones on the phone, they're the ones in person talking to customers. And uh, and a common criticism is that the marketing team is sitting in a back room somewhere developing programs and campaigns and not listening and touching customers. And so having and leading that discussion with the sales organization is really beneficial, because it demonstrates the engagement that we all need to have with those customers as they go through a buying process.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I do find that, to your point, I mean, for the most part, marketers often do get isolated, especially in B2B, because salespeople are often having more conversations, or sales development reps are, or whoever.
Yeah.
But marketing, in effect, is isolated. And so what you're saying is get this buyer insight. And from that, marketers have a different perspective. We aren't going to look at just how do we get the deal done, but how do we actually serve the customer and help them progress. And so you can bring a different perspective, is what I'm hearing.
That's absolutely correct. And it brings a different level of perspective. And it also takes away from where marketing teams can sometimes get stuck, which
Mhm.
is in activity-driven programs where they're doing just a lot of programs that's generating volume and activity, but not necessarily moving the ball forward.
Right.
And so really paying attention to how we can do things at different points in time to move the ball forward is awesome. And it also gives them a broader perspective of not just stopping when that lead is handed over, like, we're done, marketing's done, marketing's green, we're
Right.
good. Certainly taking responsibility for that portion of it, but our job doesn't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
And so really stepping back from the customer perspective is a way to do that.
What else can sales and marketing do to get this unified view of the customer? Since, marketing might look at it from one perspective and sales will look at it from another perspective. And often it's, I would say sales is really focused on what's going to drive revenue in the first or second 1 or 2 quarters. And while
Yeah.
marketing needs to think, 3, 4, and years beyond that.
I think the first step is really to sit down and map it out together, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to start somewhere. So I'm a true believer in starting with a rough idea based on customer insight of what
Yeah.
that buying process looks like all the way through the life cycle, and not stopping just at revenue, but looking at how do we continue to engage those customers. Because in the case of Workfront, like many businesses, we have a land and expand strategy where
Yes.
that relationship with customers continues well beyond that first sale. And so understanding that all the way through and having a sort of a first pass, and then sitting down as a senior leadership team and really refining it together, both the sales and the marketing team members, is really valuable, because then you start to share language like we talked about. You
Yes.
start to understand where the disconnects are. And sometimes when you do that, there are insights that you uncover that you thought, oh my gosh, they thought we were doing this and we thought they were doing this. And actually, no one's doing it. We have this big gap. And it gives you a lot of visibility. And to me, that is an extremely valuable exercise. And it doesn't have to be perfect either.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about journey mapping, and they spend months and months and sometimes years on mapping that journey. And to me, if you can get a basic journey down and map your business process to it, you're going to be much farther ahead than most companies. And the quicker that you can move on that, the better.
So sum it up, what I'm hearing is you to get good enough so you can act on it, and that's where the value is. That's where the refinement is through that learning.
And then you refine it over time. One of the most valuable things or tools that I have used in my career is when you bring together the sales team, the marketing team, and the finance team together as a revenue team, and you solve problems within that group, things get a lot easier. And to me, that's one of the tools that I have that I think is really beneficial, because we have to all be operating as a team. And that's the only way that you can get away from, marketing's not doing what they're supposed to do, or those salespeople aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Sitting down, we do it on a weekly basis at Workfront. We have a weekly revenue team meeting, and that includes our CFO, it includes our head of sales and myself, as well as folks on the operations team. And we go through a common set of metrics. We have one view of the truth. And then we also go through and tackle challenges that we may have. Like, we're seeing this in our pipeline. How do we tackle that issue? What's the right way to do that? And that combination of people, so we're all tackling the problem. It's not a marketing problem. It's not a sales problem. It's not a finance problem. It's a revenue team problem.
When you've talked about that sometimes it can feel a bit like this dysfunctional triangle with marketing and sales and finance. And what I love is that you're saying, no, this is actually a strength by us working together to solve problems together. Because sometimes marketers can feel like, well, finance doesn't get it. They're just trying to, all I have to do, I spend most of my time justifying why what I need to do is going to make a difference in the business, and vice versa. You actually are working together, and it's not just quarterly, you're doing it weekly.
We're doing it weekly, and everyone brings a different lens. There's a different lens that's brought to the table with each perspective, and that helps with problem solving.
That's really cool. How can marketers raise the performance of sales or the process today? Are there any things that you see right now as you look at what you've noticed?
I think strength of sales enablement programs is tremendous. So as you look at developing marketing campaigns, ensuring the inclusiveness of those campaigns with the BDR, ADM, inside sales function, as well as with the sales and sales leadership teams, and ensuring engagement and alignment. Because to me, that is one of the most valuable pieces of communication, is ensuring that the campaigns that we're investing the company's money in are well understood and agreed to by the sales organization, so they can support them as they continue through a buying process. And ensuring that it isn't just about developing a campaign to identify a lead and or a qualified sales opportunity and stopping there. Instead, developing the campaign and enabling the field representatives, whether they be on the phone or in person, enabling that they can carry those same messages forward, and giving them the tools to do that. So that is one thing that I feel really strongly about. And one of the areas that can be frustrating is when a sales and marketing team isn't working as well together, and the sales team is like, I don't understand or know the campaigns that you're running in my territory or against my, there's no excuse for that anymore. We have technology that enables that today, and we have common systems and platforms that we're using, whether it be a marketing automation platform or a CRM platform. There's no excuse. And so to me, that's a really important part that marketing has responsibility for, is ensuring that campaign development is not only informed, but also supported all the way through the buying process.
What other advice might you have to marketers and listeners out there who want to improve operating as one team?
I would say aligned and shared goals. That is certainly something that a common set of key metrics that the entire team is looking at, and that it's not metrics by team or by channel. It's metrics for the marketing organization that we all play a role in. That to me is extremely important. In addition, ensuring that there's visibility to the work that's going on in the business. And, that's one of the tools, not to be self-serving, but that's one of the places that Workfront actually helps us a lot, is that we can see what everyone else is working on. And that is a really valuable tool to ensure alignment, and also ensure better use of our investment dollars, so we're not overlapping with each other, or working against each other. And so the visibility into the programs that we're investing in at a very detailed level is an important part of working together as an organization with a common goal.
What would you say is the most significant trend you see affecting your work today?
Well, I mean, marketing has changed so much. Like that's such a loaded question, because you look at like over my tenure, not just at Workfront, but over my career, like the technology that we have at our fingertips today as a marketer is literally overwhelming. And so one of the skills that I think is really important for marketing leaders across marketing organizations, regardless of B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, is to understand technology and the impact that technology has to your business process, and understanding where technology can help you solve problems, and to look at technology to support your business process, not to drive it. So the reason why I say that is because I've worked in many organizations where there's so many tools out there that will solve problems. And so it's really easy to say, we have this problem, let's go get this tool. I call that toolitis. And we've had our fair share of it. I've seen it certainly at Workfront, as well as at other companies that I've worked for. And understanding at a deeper level how the technology can support your business and your business goals is a really important skill. And that speaks to digital transformation. You think about marketing is one of the organizations in an enterprise that has been digitally transformed. We do marketing so differently today than we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so digital transformation has really driven lots of change, not just in marketing, but in departments, in large enterprises. They're constantly changing and having to adapt the way they work. And so to me, that is sort of that biggest like change that's going on in industry today, is as companies, there's no company on the planet that would say, well, we're not going to transform digitally. Companies have to in order to keep up today. And, but it happens department by department, marketing being on the early end. But it's changing the way knowledge workers work in any organization. And to me, that's the hardest thing to keep up with.
So with all this technology, how do you see empathy or customer empathy fitting in?
Well, I think that it is an area that has probably been overlooked as marketers especially have adopted technology. It's become all about the data. It's become about the analytics. It's become about the numbers. And so we've forgotten that there's actually a customer on the receiving end, and that it isn't just about the numbers. It's about tying to the emotions and how does a customer feel as they go through a buying process, and being deliberate about ensuring that messaging is targeting people is hard. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of companies have forgotten in this age of digital transformation and this age of, an overwhelming amount of data. The marketing job has become a data-centric job, not a people-centric job. And I think that it needs to balance out. And I think both are critically important, because the concept that it's people, even in a B2B setting, you're not selling to companies, you're selling to people.
Right.
And unlocking the insights, the emotional triggers that people have is how you're going to move things forward. And how can you use technology to support that versus just using technology as an enabler? So I think it's gotten lost. As we've gone, marketing's gone from, almost 100% art to, really science-based.
Right.
You've forgotten the people. We've forgotten the people component, and that's something that we have to layer back in. And the companies that are doing well are the ones that have done that successfully.
You've been so great. How can listeners get in contact with you and learn more from you?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Heidi Melin, and then certainly check out workfront.com.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.